Hi, Jarrad Mahon here from Investors Edge Real Estate and welcome to my Perth property market update for February. Hope you've had a wonderful break across Christmas and an awesome Australia Day and started to make your plans for the year. I would love to give you an update into the sale and the rental market and really make sure you know where we're at with things. A lot's been changing over the last couple of months and a lot of it has been good news for property investors. So it's nice to say that for once. In the last 2 to 3 years, haven't had too much to be excited about. But the market's starting to show decent green shoots, and we can see that the number for sale has continued to track and trend downwards. Got the trend line there to show you. We hit a low of 13,465 properties. Compared to the same time last year, we're 8% down in supply, so that's really awesome. And even we're slightly down on July, when the market is often a bit higher across winter. So really continuing to trend back the other way still, which is nice. Month on month, we're cycling down in our supply. And typically when we get to about 10,000 properties, that's when we cross over back from where we're still in a buyer's market, bottoming out, and then we'll start crossing over more into a more neutral market and then into a seller's market. So at 13,500 roughly now. When we look at the numbers sold, which is the other half of the equation, we can see a bit more buoyant back and forth from this slight trend that we've got going up. We haven't had any major factors to change our demand side of the equation. We really need to keep seeing that confidence come back, keep seeing those jobs start, and then see our interstate and overseas migration pick up again. But it's still gradually increasing month on month. We have had a couple of larger swings here in September and November. But overall, unless we deviate from this trend, the market will keep tightening up as the supply decreases, demand slightly increases. You can see, compared to the darker months of July, we're slightly better, and compared to the same time last year, it's a negligible but slightly down number of sales per week. So we're only talking about 560 per week in January versus 567 last year, so very much on par with where we were for demand in this month for last year. So you see the house prices has continued to slide, and the prices is reflective of that supply and demand equation, so we won't actually see this start to come back up. And when it does, things got to tighten a bit further. When that does, that's when we'll officially enter the recovery stage of our cycle that I'll refer to later. But we're now at 512 from memory. Had a slight increase over this last quarter of September, which is nice, but we still haven't jumped out of this trend yet. So we really need to have another increase and push through the trend, and then we'd be starting to recover across the whole. Now, of course, I'm talking about a whole of Perth average in those figures above. Some suburbs have already started their recovery. Some suburbs have got further to go, further small decreases over the next year. And you can see the biggest winners of 2017 here. I've done a lot of research this month, been speaking in a few different seminars for investor groups, and I'm full bottle on where things are at. So you can see that all the upper end suburbs last year were the big growers. Every one of these top performers is priced between $850 and $1.3 million. There's a $2 million there in Cottesloe. So what's actually happened there is the top end actually got hit really hard over the last 3 years, and the bottom end got hit really hard, generally speaking. The middle kind of was insulated, didn't lose too much value, around 5% in most cases. The upper ends lost more. People have then started to see a lot of value in these top end suburbs, and they've started to buy back in last year and really upgrade into them and see the value. What's going to happen this year, I believe, is we'll start seeing that demand head down in price as these suburbs become overpriced, they'll look to the neighbouring areas, and we'll start to see that ripple down to the middle price points. And I always suggest that investors focus in the middle because they get that growth as it comes through, but they also aren't exposed to the bigger decreases that the bottom and the top end are when we have a downward market. So they were our biggest comebacks last year. Look for that to spread down to lower price points this year. In the Perth rental market, we manage all across Perth. As you know, we're a property management specialist in 180 plus suburbs, so we've got a very unique view, and we're definitely having a buster start to the year renting properties. We've had a record turnouts to some of them that we haven't seen in 3 or 4 years. And we're finding it a lot easier to rent properties providing they're priced right and presented right, still needing both of those things to be able to lease in a quick enough period, but generally we're getting them away in under 3 weeks. Working very hard but to still do it. Number for rent has continued to decrease, which is really nice for landlords that own properties already, continuing to tighten up, and we really had a dip down in January of this year, so we're 11.5% down on July and a whole 9% similar to the sale market down on January last year, so really starting to tighten up there. And as that gets tighter, we're seeing the vacancy rate drop as well. This is the biggest change in the vacancy rate that I can actually report to you. Since November, when it started to decrease, it's really tightened up, and we're now at 5.6% when we were as high as 7.6% there. So very exciting that this is tightening up. Generally, the long-term average where prices, rental prices are stable is between that around 3.5%. Prices are stable. When we drop below that into sub 3%, that's when we tighten and see prices come up again. So this will need to come back and tighten up a bit further before we see a change to prices. And the median rent here you can see drifted off from its peak at $480 back in September 2013, and we've had this strong trend of decrease, and then we've stabilised over the last 6 to 9 months at $350, and I expect that it will continue to stay there and start to gradually work its way back up over the next 6 months. It'll reach its bottoming, and then we'll be in a recovery of the rental market too. So final points on timing, just to give you that larger perspective on the rest of Australia and where we sit. Perth's now officially in December, we officially moved around to being at the bottom of our market. This is Heron Todd White, Property Clock. All the investors around Australia, certainly all the ones that I know, and all the commentators follow this, and it very much becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So as more people see it, more people believe it, and then it comes about, and all my stats indicate that we're definitely at our bottom because we've started strongly trending back the other way with supply. We just need to see that get to that critical point where price changes and starts coming back, and then we move around to start a recovery. So other areas that are further on than us in their cycles, you can see southwest of WA, they're indicating that that's starting a recovery. We've got Ipswich, Townsville, Cairns, start a recovery. Brisbane and Adelaide are further around. Launceston in Tassie, further around. And then we've got Gold Coast and Melbourne approaching the peak of their markets. Peak of market for Newcastle and the further out New South Wales areas. And then we've got Sydney and Canberra now starting to decline. So a lot of the East Coast news is going to very much be dominated by what Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne are doing. So expect that to turn more negative towards them, and much more, we're seeing a lot more positive news and green shoots out of Perth. So we're already starting to hear from investors from the East Coast over the last couple of months. Great to see some of them picking up some really good buys here in Perth. And if you do need help with your search, we can provide input on selection of suburbs. We work with some really great team of buyers agents, surveyors, builders, etc. that we can refer you to in order to make a great buy and move a project forward. And then on the selling side, I'm still selling for a lot of smaller developers and investors, helping them choose their timing and work through their options in the process. And of course, property management's our core focus that we do everything from. So if we can help you out in any of those fronts, get in touch with me, and I'd love to work through your plans with you.
See ya.